Hey there, folks. Welcome to episode 47 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. I've got a twofer on deck this week. My guests are Vita Ayala and Emily Pearson, the creative team behind The Wilds, set to debut on February 28th from Black Mask Studios. It's a crazy post-apocalyptic story where a horrifying plague has decimated the human population. I've only seen the first 5 pages, and I'm already hooked. If you want to pick up The Wild, your best bet is to pre-order the book at your local comic shop. The final order cutoff date is January 8th, so be sure to let your shop know that you want the book before then. I probably don't have to tell you this, but pre-orders are super important for comics, so tell your shop that you want this. Emily can be found online on Twitter and Instagram at EmishlyArt, that's spelled E-M-I-S-H-L-Y Art, and Vita can be found online on Twitter at DefinitelyVita. In other news, did you know that Horror Talk has been doing a bunch of unboxing videos? I open up Loot Crate every month with my 2 kids who are getting increasingly rowdy and out of control. My editor Steve has been recording himself opening every other box lately. He did one with just food and snacks. They can all be found on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/HorrorTalk or at horrortalk.com/HorrorTalk-TV. Be sure to check them out. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, that is it for the prologue this week. Now let's get right into episode 47 of Funny Book Splatter with my guests Vita Ayala and Emily Pearson. Cool. So the way I like to start the show is to ask the creator to pitch their book. So if you're out on the convention floor and someone's walking by and you have them for a few minutes, how would you describe The Wilds?
Emily, I want to hear what you have to say, actually.
Oh boy. Okay. So I would describe The Wilds as being it's a post-apocalyptic comic book about a runner named Daisy Walker. And what a runner means is it has the best description ever. I love the way you guys put it. It's a cross between the black market and the postal service. And so while Daisy is going on her runs, she sometimes comes across these sort of flower zombie creatures called abominations, which were touched by the plague, and they have plants growing out of their skin. And so as all of this happens, her partner Heather goes missing, so she goes on a mission to find Heather. So that's the basic rundown of the elevator pitch or the story for The Wilds. It's very graphic. It's not meant for kids, but it's a super fun story.
That's how I've talked it up in the past. I basically, when people ask me like, but what does it mean? It's because inevitably you will get asked that question, and that's a fair question. It's basically a metaphor. So the runners in the compound, which is where they bring all their salvage to, is basically a metaphor for life, right? And these runners are people who risk their lives every day, who work very, very hard in very difficult situations and don't get the same respect and rewards as the people that work in the actual compound. So this is kind of a story about, certain kinds of people who are expected to do a lot of physical and emotional labor and are not in any way acknowledged for it. So that's the basics of it. It follows a lot of people of color and queer people and that kind of stuff. And I think thematically that's where I go with the elevator pitch. But I literally I'm like, yeah, man, there are a lot of people running around out there and there are flower zombies. It's rough.
Sometimes that's all you need to hook a reader anyway. So if it's like, they might have got you, at flower zombies and be like, nope, say no more. Like I'm there.
That's why I lead with flower zombies.
And I like the take on them because it's not a traditional zombie. They're not just like shuffling out there to go like, oh, brains. There's this kind of like inhuman yet beautiful quality to them because like they seem dead, or like at least lifeless, like behind the eyes, but they're still kind of moving around for some reason that I'm sure you'll get into in the book.
Yes.
So I like that and I also like that it's not a zombie. Like it's not your traditional thing. So So how did something like a flower zombie come about? How would you describe a flower zombie?
Oh boy.
Well, this was like a weird kind of almost like chemical reaction of Emily and I talking to each other, I think, because we were just talking about like just cool. Can we curse? Is that a thing?
Oh, curse! Yeah, go for it.
All right, fuck, good. All right, so we were just talking about shit that like we wanted to put into the story, and I asked her, you know, all right, what do you want to draw? And she was like, oh, I really want to draw like mutated stuff, like mutations and stuff. And I was like, well, that in my mind, I was like, oh fuck, that's nothing like what I have. And then I was like, I don't know what I can't remember what I wrote. It was probably like, sure, that sounds great. That's exactly what I was thinking. And then we just kept talking, and just it came out of it. It was weird. It was like I can't even remember. I'm sure it was Emily. I'm almost 99% sure.
That's the thing. It's like half the ideas that we have. Like I can't remember like where they came from. It's just so weird because we just talk about a lot of different stuff like this, and then sometimes we find different story elements, and then Vita makes them not sound like ramblings of someone that doesn't know how to write, and she polishes everything.
So all right, a couple questions here. So are your regular conversations spiraling around mutants and monsters and things like that? Is that just like everyday conversation for you?
I mean, yeah. How about you?
Yeah. I'm just making sure. Look, we're in good company then. I'm happy. And Vita, then, were you just like, all right, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this, but I want to work with Emily, and I'll figure out how to get that into a story?
For me personally, if I have a story already in mind, to me, the minute details, and this seems like bigger than a minute detail, but to me, it's a minute detail. It's not as important because it's a collaborative thing. So as long as like the core is the same, I want to know what my partner wants to do, and I want to put that into the story, because otherwise it's not a collaboration. So she wanted to do something like mutated, and I was like, all right, well, how will I make that interesting for her? And also not the grossest thing to draw every second of every day. Because I like gross shit. Like, that's really cool, but I can imagine that getting tedious to draw. And then we were talking, and we both, I don't even think we were talking about this, but we both kind of talked about how we wanted to see visually beautiful things. And then I think both of us came up with the idea at once, honestly. And it just kind of came to when we were like, oh, that sounds awesome. And that kind of collaboration is what I'm in comics for. Like, I'll make almost anything work because I'm not the one that has to spend, 2-3 days drawing a page or however long it takes. See, I don't even know how long it takes. I have no idea. It's a mystery to me. That's magic. So I want my partner to be as happy as humanly possible.
Well, that's speaking to the merits of the medium. It's a collaborative medium, and you might have an idea, or Emily might have an idea, but it's by working together that you turn that into something that the world can see. So that's the wonders of comics, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I remember just like talking to Vita, and I was like, oh, I might be interested in doing something with like mutations. And they're like, okay, yeah, let me work with the script a little bit. And I'm just like, oh no, did I just make them like completely rewrite the whole thing? And so I was just worried. I was like, no, it's okay. You don't have to do that. Like, if it goes off your story, like, it's totally fine. So we ended up talking about it a lot, and we ended up really being on the same page with it. So it's just weird because I've never had an experience in comics like that before, where I've worked with a writer and we've been on sync with something like that's pretty important to the comic book like that.
Well, hopefully
it was meant to be.
Yeah, there you go. Hopefully that all translates into the book itself and resonating with readers and everything, because I think that shows on the page. Like you could tell a better story together than just like, you know, all right, I'm going to write something and then here just make the pictures just like it is here. So how did you guys work from a creative process standpoint? Did you write Vita, did you write a full script, or are you more of like workshopping things together?
I mean, I write full scripts, but I tend to, as I'm writing them, like I'm always talking to my collaborators if I can be. I like to talk as much as possible with people. And honestly, like I can legitimately say that I've been in the middle of writing something and Emily has said something and I'm like, whoop, all right, we're going to go back and we're going to change this right now. And that'll just make it all better in the end. And it's true. It's saved a lot of grief, I think. So for me personally, I write the skeleton and then I like to talk out the like muscles and the skin.
Yeah, I like it. It makes for a more collaborative process that way, instead of like you kind of creating in a vacuum and then sending it off only when it's all done, I guess. But that way you can work.
I don't know shit about drawing, dude. Like I don't know very much about, you know, blocking and layouts. Like I know what I like and I know what I've read and I know what I'm drawn to. And that's part of the reason that I was so excited to work with Emily, was because she had her website and she had samples up and I was like, I love the construction of the page. This person knows what they want and knows how to tell a story. And so I couldn't possibly do it without her. So I can't tell her what to do. I can only be like, this is what I'm thinking.
Now, the idea of this kind of post-apocalyptic landscape, I feel like it's been popping up more and more frequently of late. I mean, that could just be the way that, we see the only possible outcome for some of the horrible things that happen in the news today. Is there a favorite movie or story or something that kind of drew you to that particular genre? Like I'm thinking, like Mad Max is something that always kind of pops up in that world. But anything like that has kind of stuck out to you over time?
Emily, take it.
I have to think about this for a little bit. I play too many video games. So, I think maybe Fallout for me. If you guys have ever played that before, it's one of my favorite games.
Yeah.
It's so much fun to just be in that world, and everyone's just crazy and weird, and they're still in the 50s. And it's just so silly, and like it feels like you're the only one that realizes it in the whole game. So yeah, it's definitely fun.
That's actually a really good one. Yeah, I'm obsessed with post-apocalyptic scenarios as like a way to tell stories in general. I think that you can really get at the core of, whatever fable that you're trying to tell through them, because they're so stark and so intense and the stakes are ridiculously high. So I love Mad Max. I love Fallout. New Vegas is one of the greatest games ever. I will fight anybody who says otherwise. I love zombie stuff, which is weird because I'm also terrified of zombies, so I don't sleep very much. Like I love like Left 4 Dead and like Last of Us and like all of the stuff. So yeah, I'm constantly in that world.
But was that something you guys were always into growing up as well, or was this something that you kind of like figured out later on in life?
For me, I figured out I think when I started getting to high school or so. My brother's a writer, and he writes basically 90% of what he writes is post-apocalyptic. So I've read a lot of his stuff, and it's like, okay, this is kind of cool. I'm kind of into this too, but I don't want to admit it because I want to pretend to have nothing in common with him, and just completely ignore him. No, but it's I think around high school I started getting into that sort of stuff, but that was also the age I started really getting into comics and stuff like that.
I grew up on this horror stuff, so my mom was very permissive about what I was allowed to read and see, which bless her. And yeah, so I remember watching, like, I think it's called Day of the Comet, like, on TV when I was really, really young, and that started that horrible process of me never sleeping. I don't think I've slept since I was like 7 years old, to be honest.
Yeah, they're.
But no, like I love, like, Aliens was like my favorite movie when I was a kid, and that's not quite post-apocalyptic, but it's very dystopian. And then the scenario itself is like they're not zombies, they're aliens, but it's very much survival, and that movie has completely influenced everything I've ever done.
That's one of my favorite movies too. I love Aliens.
You'd be surprised how often that movie comes up. Honestly, like every other interview I've done on this show, people have referenced that as like such an influential piece of like kind of like their gateway into the horror genre. It's really incredible how many people it touched.
It was one of the last ones. Man.
It's crazy.
like I couldn't, like, anyone born post the movie coming out, I can't. They'd be lying if they didn't say they were influenced by that movie, even tangentially. Aliens, an Alien, and The Thing.
Oh my gosh. I remember being drawn into that movie when I was a kid because it had a dog in it. It was so scary.
Plot twist.
Yeah, it wasn't like Air Bud or something else. It was a very, very different kind of movie. Yeah, that and very permissive parents that either were totally okay with their kids watching whatever, or were just completely unaware. It seems like that bred this entire, like, a whole generation of horror creators, which has been really great. I mean, it's been really beneficial for me and like, you know, the greater, you know, horror fan public, I guess. But you kind of like wonder, looking back on it, like, was that okay? Like, was it okay for my parents to be like, yeah, it's okay, he can watch Friday the 13th, who cares? Like, oh, you want to get part 7 and 8? Go for it. Like, go ahead, kids, watch it for your sleepover. But that was what we did. It was totally fine then. Very different time period, I guess.
My mom had one rule. All right, we didn't have a lot of money, but she was very into, like, letting you read so you could read whatever you wanted. And if we went and we got a video, no matter what it was, you had to finish it. So, like, if she was going to spend money, that was the only rule. And so I definitely was a child who would, like, be like, this cover looks cool, and I'd pick it up. And I can tell you 50% of the time, probably not okay. Like, but she was very, I mean, she's a hippie as much as you can be. And she was very like, hey, if this is what you're interested in, we can talk about it, but you've made your choices. So
no crying about it. You got to watch that movie now. However much blood and violence it is, you're going to finish that. Like, well, that's like the thing where, like, oh, I found this pack of cigarettes. You're going to sit here and smoke an entire carton. And it's like, well, that's yeah,
yes.
Okay, I guess. Not really what I was expecting.
Yeah. That'll teach you sometimes,
something
man.
Like
I
that,
mean,
yeah. But watching a horror movie, I feel like it could go either way in that case, because you could just be encouraging them. So again,
that's true. Although my mom was a huge fan, so she's like a huge sci-fi and mystery fan, thrillers, horror movies. She's afraid of blood, so not as much, but she loves like I watched Seven when that first came out, which was, I was way too young to watch that movie when it first came out, and she was just like, listen, this is what I want to watch. I'm a single mom. We have one TV, so you can either go away or you can watch this with me. And I was like, I guess I'm watching this. And so I think that she viewed stories and media in a way that is different than most parents. Or she's like, yeah, she's a very intelligent person. She's like one of the smartest human beings I know. And she's like, I understand the stories beneath the stories, and this is important for children to know. And I'm like, there's a bad man stabbing people. So
yeah, you get to what he represents, see? And now years later, you're telling your own stories, and yeah, you've got a post-apocalyptic era, but it's also saying more about the world that we live in. So there you go. It all comes back together.
Yeah, I think that actually kind of represents Vita pretty well, because like a lot of your stories have like either political or like social themes in them. So I mean, it definitely might have come from your mom.
So do you start with that theme in mind and build the story around that, or do you like work off of an idea or an aspect you want to kind of build into?
Good question. I guess, I mean, it's both. It's both. I come to them very, very close together. So sometimes it'll be like, you know, I want to write a story about zombies. What could the story actually be about? Because zombies are never about people eating each other. It's really about, you know, capitalism or consumption or whatever. Or I want to write a story about, you know, how the government oppresses people. What will make that interesting for people to see? I know Emily's working on a bunch of stuff, so I would actually be interested to hear her thoughts on that kind of process.
Yeah. What do you got?
Oh, yeah. I do sometimes, but not recently. I don't really write my own stories as much, but I feel like when I work on something of my own, I take the cheapest route where I start sketching as much as I can so I can kind of minimize can't talk right now. Minimize the writing aspect of it so that it's like if you read anything that I've made, it's just all like there's no like inner dialogue or anything like that. It's as little scripting and dialogue as possible. And so I'll work on the layouts of the pages as I write the script. So that's how I kind of make my own comics. But when I work with other people, I tend to I don't know. I want to say that I'm more thoughtful about it, but sometimes I just go and I start drawing the script. We work on concepts most of the time first, but, besides doing layouts, I just kind of go in and start penciling right away.
Well, I guess every process can be different. So if you're coming at it from a certain angle or something for one story, it's not like that is the only way that you can ever write a story ever again. You know, you could always change it up and do whatever you need to reach that goal of telling the story.
Yeah, for sure.
And a quick sidebar, we talked about like other things that you've done. I have in my hand your the cult classic. I guess is it an ash can from that both of you guys had contributed some work to that I picked up in New York Comic Con from Elliot Rahal. So really fun book. I'm trying to get him on the show now as well to talk about this book. I can't wait to see this explored further with this kind of shared universe horror story coming from Vault soon. So yes, cool stuff there. Where are we gonna go here? Oh, so to land at Black Mask, how did you guys get to them as a publisher?
I have another book that is in the works with Black Mask, which has already been announced, called Our Work Fills the Pews, which I'm co-writing with Matt Rosenberg. And I know those guys pretty well. I see them at conventions all the time. I'm usually at their booth. And so we're always get to talking, and they're always like, oh, what are you working on? What's going on? And I had this story, and I was like, yeah, this is kind of what I want to do. And, I sent the pitch through the machine and it got through. I really love their stuff. I love all of the creators that are there. I love all the books that they put out. And I was like, this seems like a good place for this story. So it was nothing glamorous.
Well, they've been really excelling in a lot of genre stuff lately, and a lot of things that have a message to them too. So it's you get more for your comic dollar, I think, with a lot of the stuff that Black Mask has been publishing, because it's not just, oh well, this was a cool story that had monsters in it, or this is a cool story that had zombies or whatever. It's it reaches to higher levels with a lot of their stories to tell different kinds of things. Certainly things you're not going to see anywhere else, which is very cool. I
agree. I love this stuff.
So how long were you guys working on this project now that it's due out in late February, the first issue. So how long was that in the works before it's finally ready to see the light of day?
Oh man, has it been like a year maybe? I mean, since we started talking about it.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
I think we've been talking about it for
Yeah. So I mean, I started working on the actual pages in. Can I say that? Is that kind of me?
Yes.
Started working on the actual pages in November or so, and so yeah. So we've been doing concept work, and we've been working on the pitch and all this different stuff for about a year, but we actually just started working on the actual pages for the comic in November. And, we got kind of the team together really quickly, which really surprised me. We got like a bunch of different people on board. So, yeah, that all happened, I'd say, starting in October. So we started getting a bunch of different people together to do, covers and letters and all that different good old stuff.
Is it planned as a is it a miniseries? Is that right?
The first story arc is a miniseries, yes. There's, like in any other comic, there's no guarantee for more, but if people like it, we would happily do more in this universe for sure. At least we've been talking about that.
Do you have more planned out, like, in your head to know what's going to happen next already? Or do you not want to get your hopes up just yet?
I always have hope, man. We've been talking about it. I have a million ideas. I know that Emily has ideas. So, I don't know.
We've been talking about it in the form of Pinterest boards. So, yeah.
Correct.
Must be some very interesting Pinterest boards if the preview pages are any indication.
Yeah, my friends will look at my Pinterest board and they're just like, "What the heck? The wilds look crazy!" And it's like, yeah, I know. It's like, we've been putting some good effort into finding different pictures.
Yeah, I don't know.
I like to see what she puts up that way, and then I'll look and I'm like, what could possibly be as scary as what she's putting up? I know I'll find some abandoned, like, I don't know, like amusement park shit. It's like, oh god.
Oh my god, that's one of the most fun parts. Is we have a mutual follower on Twitter, or I'm not sure if you know him, Vita, but he's this 16-year-old kid in high school, and he every time he sees like pages or something, like I always have a head exploding or something, and he's just like, "Thanks, Emily. This is really great to see. I'm really happy to see someone's head exploding on this." And I'm like, "You're welcome."
Just doing your part.
Oh, children. Oh, God. Oh, parents. I'm sorry.
That's a future horror writer right there. That's someone who's going to see that and it's like, yes, we're gonna put this in. That's going to be inspiring him to tell his own stories down the line. So, the same way that all the movies and stuff that you guys watched as kids is coming back to help inspire you to tell further stories. It's all connected somehow. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think he's a little less thrilled about it.
Well, I think he would hopefully know what he's getting into if he's following you, and that's the kind of stuff that pops up frequently on Twitter. There's easy ways to fix that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, what I was gonna say, I have, for some reason, I set up a Pinterest board for HorrorTalk once, and I was like, oh, like we'll just post pictures from previews and reviews and stuff, and we'll put that to link up. And I don't know what I was thinking or what I was like, this is a great platform for us to post that stuff. And I think everyone just kind of gave up on it after a little while. Like I was pushing it, like, no, yeah, we got Twitter, you got Facebook, let's also use Pinterest. And then I realized that a lot of what Pinterest was using at the time was wedding planning and traveling, and I'm like, someone's gonna be clicking through here thinking oh, I want to make something for dinner, what's some cool thing, and why is that guy's head blowing up, why is this guy getting eviscerated, and I'm like, check out this review of this new comic from so and so, and it's like, oh, so maybe this isn't the right platform for us. So we kind of abandoned it for now. But now I want to go back. I feel like I have to reinvigorate our Pinterest board if I know that you're also sharing stuff out there. Maybe it's time to revisit it.
Well, it's nice for me especially because if I want to put like all my photo references on one place, I don't have to save all the photos that I want to use or just take a bunch of photos and use up my hard drive. And so it's nice to have like references of different characters, but also just in case we want inspiration for what we're trying to make the comic like look like. Because there's it's definitely a big place for like wedding planning, but there's a surprising amount of like apocalyptic pictures on Pinterest.
There's something for everyone now, I guess.
Just a bunch of abandoned, overgrown pictures.
So much. Oh my god.
Yeah, I thought we would run out, but I feel like we just keep finding more.
Now, is that sorry?
I had to make a subfolder for that, right? Like we were just throwing pictures into the Pinterest, and I don't know how it works, but I realized you could do subfolders, and I had to go back and find all the character stuff and put it into a separate folder because there was just so much like desolate America.
Yeah.
Now, is that something you think you would ever like share out there as like it's almost like it's like a peek into your thought process in creating the book, whether it's something that would be like back matter for a single issue or something for a collected edition down the line?
Yeah, I don't see why not. The only issue is that I don't think we could ever publish it in any form because it's not our photos. Right. But I mean, you guys can like take a look at it if you want, I suppose.
I love that stuff. I love like whenever artists and creators, give us parts of their thought process. I always like. One of the first things we shared was we both had playlists for it. Like, here's the link to mine. Here's the link to mine. And like, I've like plugged because mine is public, so I just plug it like all the time. I'm like, hey, when you're reading it, maybe you want to put this on. Like, you might enjoy.
Yeah,
so I love that kind of stuff.
I think you got a question too recently, like, what would you do if you had, like, what would your playlist for the Wilds be? And you're just like, here's my Spotify.
Already done.
I remember I was reading when Lumberjanes first came out. They had these like playlists for each character in the back of the singles, and I was like, this is literally genius. Like, this is the greatest weird. I literally ended up buying like 3 albums so I could complete the playlist in real life. Like, it was bananas. Why doesn't every comic come with this? This is crazy.
I feel like it's been happening more and more lately. It's like you're making it more of a multimedia experience in that way of like, well, you could always just read the comic and have that, but now you can have a soundtrack to it, or that kind of gives you insights into what you were thinking about, what your headspace was like when creating the book, and it just adds other levels to it. So yeah, there's always going to be people that will just read the comic and will never read anything you put in the back matter, or will never, go past that. But for those fans that want more from it, then yeah, they're going to just inhale the Spotify playlist or Pinterest boards or like, back matter essays or sketches or anything like that. It will all just kind of make for a more complete, robust experience there. I
remember there was I think it was a band camp recently for it was for a fake version of Ashes on a Sunday, which if you read DC Comics is Black Canary's band. So they I don't think it's a playlist. I think it's, if I remember right, it's like what her band would actually sound like. It's just so cool. I love that sort of stuff so much.
But that sounds like an indie thing, right? Not something that like DC had put together.
No, yeah, I think that was put together by the writers specifically.
Yeah, that kind of stuff just helps to round out the whole reading experience as a whole too. So it's like, yeah, like if you're reading a book about, the main character who's in a band, it would make sense to have a, musical accompaniment for something like that. So, shifting back to horror in general, I know we touched upon first glimpses into the genre, but Do you remember what like your first horror movie was or first horror comic was?
Oh God, I do. I was terrible.
You said that. You said that very quickly. Like you knew for sure exactly what this was.
Yeah. I saw The Birds when I was like 5 or 6. And oh my gosh, I'm from Santa Rosa, and The Birds takes place in Bodega, which is like 30 or 40 minutes, I think, from my town, and it's like, so it's like whenever you go to the beach, you go to Bodega, or you go to different, close by towns, so it's just like, I don't ever want to go to the beach again, like the birds are going to kill me. And it's like, they have, every time we would go, my parents would take me to the schoolhouse from the Birds movie. And so I just feel like, I want to leave as soon as possible. Like, I don't want to be around to wait for them to come.
Did your parents know that it freaked you out that much?
Yeah. My parents would always try to like scare me as much as possible when I was a kid.
Preparing you for your future as a counselor.
See, that's one way to handle, I guess, if the kid's interested in it. It's like, oh, are you sure you're interested in it? Because like, are you really sure? Because like, here's the real place where this happened. Well, like, or it's at least filmed. You don't have to say like it's not like it's based on a true story, but still have to freak you out.
Yeah. I just remember it was like, it wasn't scary to them either, because it was like I think that movie was made around like the 50s or the 60s, and so the special effects, there was this like scene where like a bunch of small birds came into this house and started attacking people, and my parents were like, that isn't scary, that's just a filter, you can totally tell like there's no actual birds there, and I'm just like, it's totally scary, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, because I don't.
Movie magic works.
I don't think I saw The Birds until like I was way older, and I was like, really, like this is it, like it didn't do anything for me, but I could see how like if you see it at a young impressionable age that it can certainly make a mark and have you questioning visits to the beach like that.
Yeah, because I remember there's like a part of the movie they were just like, the birds have come to like Santa Rosa or something like that. I'm like, nope, no, I don't want that.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
What about you?
That's gonna be me as a parent.
What about you? What was your first experience? Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Are you saying that would be like what you would purposely be scaring kids?
Oh my God, I'm gonna be a terrible parent. I can't wait. They're either gonna be like the most rugged like kids ever, or they're just I don't know.
They're gonna find your comic books and they're gonna.
Oh my God, I don't know if I would let them read it. I worked in comics retail for like 10 years, and I'd see some parents come in and let their kids read some pretty wild shit, and I'd be like, really? But now that I think about it, about half, I'd be like, yeah, I guess if my kid found it, like, I'd let him read it. Not like a 6-year-old reading The Walking Dead, which is definitely a thing that happened, but that's a little too much for me. But I think my first experience with horror was probably Aliens, actually, the second one. My mom rented a bunch of sci-fi all the time because sci-fi is her jam, and we had one TV, and like I said, we had a small apartment, so you could either be in the room and watching it or in another room hearing it and not knowing what the fuck was going on. And that was too much for me. My mind is way more horrifying than what happens on the screen. So yeah. And I think my first horror comic was probably Lady Death, now that I think about it.
That's a good one.
Yeah. People get down, like, say shit about that book. I love that book. I love that book
It's good.
Have you followed it? Because the creators kept going with it. So like he's at Kickstarters now for like oversized single issues and packs a ton of stuff into the Kickstarter boxes. So it's ridiculous.
Oh no, I don't have much. Don't do this.
Yeah.
Oh God. I stopped when Chaos collapsed. Like I used to read all of Chaos's books, and then they ended, and I was like, oh, that's really sad. End of an era. But now I have to go back, I guess.
Well, yeah, he's on
Find them.
Brian Pulido. Yeah, that's how you pronounce. I hope. Yeah, he's one of those guys that like it's like, all right, yeah, we're just gonna make the book, and the book costs like $10, $15, whatever. But like he always blows out stretch goals, so it's like, all right, also in the box you get this and a sticker and a pin and this other, and then like all of a sudden you get this like giant box of stuff for it. So I don't know. Like I've tried. I have to go back and like pursue some of that because like I feel like writing for Horror Talk, I've created a more of an appreciation for the genre that I didn't necessarily have early on. Like I always liked horror movies, and I liked some of like the classics, like your Friday the 13th and your Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff like that. But to me, it was like, all right, yeah, they're okay. Like it wasn't totally like mind blowing. But in reading a ton of comics, or horror comics specifically, and recognizing like, oh, this is how you can pace something out, and you can really scare the crap out of somebody by just by reading on the page, where you can't control pacing, you can't control like how quickly someone's reading it or anything like that. You have the page turn, and that can be so effectively used, and I have such an appreciation for it now.
Man, EC has been releasing a bunch of stuff, like reprints of stuff, and I just forgot. Like I read a bunch of that stuff when I was a kid, but like, man, those guys were amazing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Well, I mean, you look at someone like Bernie Wrightson, who unfortunately just passed away, but like his work was like insane. Like just like that, someone drew that. Like, and it's still just looking at that. It's like, how did you sit down and be like with a blank piece of paper in front of you and make that? And you can see that about anything he did.
Emily, how do you sit down and do that?
I can't do that. He uses like tech pens, and it's just like, what the heck? Oh my gosh!
Like so many lines, and just like it's nuts. But yeah, but then you could also have like the flip side of that, where you can have like a very kind of stylized look to it, and it could just be I've seen horror comics that literally are stick figures. Like those things are out there that like you can still tell a story and with it. I mean, maybe it doesn't have as much of a punch of a scare to it, but like it's still there and it's still trying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a challenge to tell like horror stories in a comic book medium, because it's limited, but it's also like the limited resources you have, you can kind of get creative with it, with like the different panel layouts and stuff like that. And so for something like The Wild, it's really fun to to try to figure out like how it can just make people squirm as much as possible.
Well, judging from the 5 preview pages you shared, I could tell you that there were at least 3 or 4 squirm-worthy moments there. That like I mean, there's one just on the second page alone, which you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But like the closer of the second page is just something like, oh god, like so that's what that person's face looks like if we were to do that to it. Like it's like, oh, that's the sound it might make if that happened. Like it's just, oh okay, like you don't think of how someone's head or body would look if it was suddenly ripped apart like that. But there we go.
My favorite in the 5 preview pages is like the 2 panel sequence where like the crowbar is through the abomination's head, and then Daisy's just stepping on his head and ripping out the crowbar. I didn't know how that would translate, and Emily just blew me away. I was like, oh, that's so brutal. That's so rugged.
And I love it. And the little squelch sound effect that comes with it, like, yep, that's the sound it's gonna make.
Gosh, so much fun. It's just like, it's crazy too, because like it's hard to find references for this stuff, because like I don't want to like actually see someone's head getting blown up, because that's just awful. So like I try to think of like the most horrifically violent movies I've seen. It's like, okay, if it's like movie gore, like that's okay. If it's real gore, like that's gonna be hard to look at that every day.
Yeah, I'm trying not to put too much where you'll have to listen. I know that our like Google like search history is probably we're on watch lists right now. Like I'm almost fine, but I try very hard to not like horrify my co-creators into a coma. Like that's not.
Oh my gosh, I love it. It's so much fun.
Well, I guess you can kind of test those limits over time and see like, all right, well, do they get freaked out with this? All right, well that's the new bar, and then you can kind of keep going.
Just angry text at 2 a.m. What the fuck?
What happened to you? Why did you think this was okay to send me?
I think Vita's like slowly learning how sick I am, and they're just gonna push the wilds into this really, really kind of horrific territory.
Yeah, I was just speaking of Google history. I was just listening to a podcast where a comedy writer was talking about it. He was talking about how he was Googling like for a bit, how much does it cost to buy a nuclear bomb, and realized like, oh, this is horrible. I shouldn't do this. So he immediately Googled, I am a comedy writer, like as if like the guy reading his from the NSA would go like, oh, okay, no, we got it. See, the next one, he's a comedy writer. You could exempt this one, all right? He's not on the watch list anymore.
Oh
but
my
yeah,
God.
your Google history's got to be
I can
scary.
only imagine what like Scott Snyder's fucking search history is like.
Yeah.
Batman for how long? Oh, it must be bananas.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because like it's all research, so it's like no. There's a reason why I'm not just doing this for kicks. Like, yeah, I want to see what someone's head looks like if it got blown up. Like, no, I need to do this to understand what sound effect I should put on the page or something like that. And I guess another option could be like, I don't know, does like fruit work? Like, could you take like an orange and kind of like rip it up and say like, all right, I guess that's what like a mussel would look like or something like that?
I don't think so, because it could in certain like aspects, but it depends like, because I think in the preview specifically when like the girl's head was getting blown up, I think Daisy had like a sawed-off shotgun, so it's like, okay, I have to make this as brutal as possible. So I was just trying to like just make every little part just like little chunks of her head flying off and just awful stuff like that.
The eye was really what got me in that. Just like kind of going off and doing its own thing. I was like, oh my God.
God, I'm so
And as a reminder, that's page 2, okay? That is the second page of the book, guys. All right? Like, if that doesn't get you interested in picking up the wilds, like, not really sure what else to tell you. But to kind of start to wrap things up a bit, I think. So the first issue debuts on February 28th. That's what looks like so much. Do you know what the final order close date is, by any chance?
It's January 8th, I think.
Yes,
all right, yeah,
that's
so
right.
Definitely be on the lookout for this. Like, again, I've read 5 pages of this book, and I'm already really looking forward to it from the looks of it, because it's got a nice blend of your post-apocalyptic, your zombie-ish things, and just good old-fashioned survival in a horrible wasteland of sorts. So we'll put links to pre-order the book on the in the show notes for this, but also like otherwise, where are the best places that folks can find you guys online?
For me, I am the handle at Emishly Art, EMISHLY, on Twitter and Instagram.
At definitely Vita on everything. That's just, if I'm online, that's where I am. Mostly on Twitter.
Yeah,
I apologize if you follow me.
All right, but so yeah, again, The Wilds debuts February 28th from Black Mass Studios. But you can check out have these preview pages been circulating out there? Are they public out there yet?
Yeah, they're on IO9. They did and I think both of us have links to that in our Twitter. I know mine is pinned. So yeah.
So we'll link that up too, in the show notes. But this is definitely this is a really fun chat, guys. Like I had a blast talking with you guys about this. I love hearing how people get their start into the genre and then how that later has influenced there. So like somewhere in your past, I guess there's a movie with a guy's head being blown up, and then it's like, and now you're drawing that in a comic book that we can all read. But that about does it then, folks, for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guest Vita Ayala and Emily Pearson. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.